Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Mentor Me panel. Welcome to our Career Path panel. Today we have with us Saga.
I went to Berkeley. I was class of 2018 at Berkeley. At Berkeley, I double majored in computer science and economics. Right now, I live in San Francisco, California. I'm a product manager or senior product manager at Truework, a fintech company. Before that, I was another fintech company, and yeah, before I grew up in Bangalore for 10 years before that. So I'm a product manager, and the product manager role is sort of a newer role in the tech industry that's kind of come up 10, 15 years ago. It's a very cross-functional role where you kind of define, what product a company should build, why they should build it, and then kind of cross-functionally lead a team to execute against that. So you work very closely with software engineers, with product designers, with marketing and sales, and you kind of execute, and then um, it's a really exciting role for people that are business minded but also like technology. And my day to day looks very different. It can be very very different depending on the day. There's no real standard day, but it'll probably be like a third to half of my time meetings. There's a lot of meetings if you're taking this role because of how cross functional it is, and I would probably work around maybe 9 hours a day or so. But it varies too. Yeah. So I was in sort of this kind of undergraduate like consulting club where I got to work with a lot of like tech companies and on projects, and they would like pay call like 5, 6 college kids like $5,000 for a semester to go work on something. It was really fun because you got to like go and actually work on real world problems and work with people within the company, present to them or some senior executives, actually present to the Square and Twitter CEO at one point, which is fun. And and yeah, I think that gets you exposed to these different types of problems companies have to solve. And then other things that got me interested are I think there are a lot of people going to college, look at what high paying jobs are like, oh, computer science is high paying jobs. And they just go and study computer science. So they don't really want to be software engineers because they don't really like, coding too much. But at the same time, they're passionate about technology, passionate about business, passionate about leadership, building a company, things like that. And I think that this kind of role is you kind of have the same kind of career growth and career trajectory as you do as a software engineer, if not greater. And, you get paid similarly, but it's a lot more cross functional, a lot more creative in some ways. I did intern in college, and that's kind of how I validated that this is something I wanted to do. So, would highly, highly recommend any people in college like definitely seek out internships. Try to get some work experience. It's a lot more valuable, in my opinion, than a lot of academic stuff you'll do. And try to do it early. Try to get one after freshman year, after sophomore year. If you have one, it's a lot easier to get the next one. So, I'm a lot more pragmatic about this. I don't think your major at the end of the day has a ton of influence on what you do. You can always, I know people who are great software engineers who did biology in college and then went to a coding boot camp later. And there's plenty of people who, where people studying software engineering, computer science, that went into banking or consulting, and, do the same job as many English or economics majors would do. So I just think that be a little bit, I would recommend to like, if your school offers some flexibility, like have one thing that's very practical and real world oriented, and maybe have something like another major or minor that's more like really up your interests, and try and do a little bit of both. Because I don't think sometimes if you study something that just you feel like is your passion, and but it doesn't have too much real world connection or impact, like you're just going to have a harder time at the end of college finding a job. You can very well find one, and maybe a year or two after college, you'll find something, transition to a job that you're happy about, but it may set you back a year or two. So just something to keep in mind. And then, but obviously, don't do something you really dislike for the sake of doing it. Like, stay true to yourself in that way. If you don't want to do engineering, computer science, don't do it. If you don't want to do economics, don't do it. But if you're like neutral about it or positive about it, be a little bit pragmatic. I came into college, wanting to maybe become an economist, study economics and math, and go to grad school to do a PhD in economics. Year one, I realized that doing a PhD in economics is all about like very, very theoretical, abstract math, and that's just not something I'm passionate about. And so, but I was still passionate about the field of economics, and but then I was like, okay, I'm in the Bay Area, everyone else is doing computer science, might as well take a class, see what it's about. Also, growing up in Bangalore, your influence like that. So I don't think I made a very explicit decision that was super thought out, like 3, 4 years in the future. It's more like I'm interested in two things that are pretty distinct. I do see computer science being a lot more relevant to the job market in technology, but economics being something a lot maybe more passionate about the computer science. So like, why not do both? Challenge myself in different ways. And Berkeley, like, I think if you like are smart about what you take and you place out of some classes, it's doable. For me, computer science probably was 85% of my time, and economics was 15%. So it depends on the major too. One major can be a lot harder than the other major. Um, and in terms of how it influenced me, it does. You surround yourself with different kinds of people because of people in my economics classes where people wanted to go into consulting, go into investment banking, or go to business school. Then people in computer science, obviously, a lot of them want to be software engineers, work in technology. So I think the more you do in general, especially if it's varied, the more diverse a set of people you can surround yourself with, the more ideas you're exposed to, the more types of career paths you're exposed to. So you kind of have a better way to pick, um, or try to get a feel for what you like and don't like, instead of if you're just, focused on just one thing and one thing only. And I think a lot of people in college don't really know what they want to do. And so I think narrowing your focus a little too early, unless you're pretty confident about it, I wouldn't advise, I wouldn't advise to do that. I would advise to keep things with a broader focus initially, but like be open to trying things out and saying no, and then narrow your focus as you go along. That being said, though, I think if you do know what you want to do, you have a huge head start compared to other people who don't know, because you'll be able to specialize in that a lot better and become a lot more competitive as a candidate and get a lot better experience and things like that. And I think you can accelerate your career growth a lot more if you were to play your cards right there.
Yeah.
But not everyone knows that early on. So yeah, it's a good question. I think there are a couple things. One, I was just like a curious person, so I'd like to like learn about things because they interested me, not necessarily because like I was forced to. And that didn't mean everything. There are plenty of things I was not interested in that I was forced to learn. But there's some innate curiosity, and I think if you can kind of align that curiosity with some sort of career path or work, then that could become really good. Because then a lot of things don't feel like work. Like you don't actually like spend your time reading articles on an industry that you're interested in, or following the news, or like watching see if a company you're interested in give a talk. Like that doesn't feel like work to you. And so try and figure what that is in whatever way possible, whether it's like, really interested in like just medicine and like, biology and like, so it's like studying for medical school isn't that painful compared to other people who are forcing themselves to do it. So I think there was a little bit of that. That's been there even before TSP since I was a kid, and that's really helped. The other thing is I do feel like I wouldn't necessarily have a strong, obviously don't be lazy, but I wouldn't necessarily say I have a strong like work ethic and put a lot of hours. But what I do think is when I do work, I work smart. I think I like learned that in TSP. It's like figure out what like the 80-20 rule, what to focus on. Like you don't need to like perfect and go 100% on everything, but like figure out what's high leverage to do and do it well. And I think that really helps in college when you're bouncing a ton of things from, two majors in this case to a social life to clubs, to relationships. And then, at work, like you have to eventually, my role, you're very independent, autonomous. So you got to really prioritize and choose what to say yes to and what to say no to. And I think that like that is something TSP helped in a way because it just threw so much at you that like I was lazy and I didn't want to study everything. So I was like, okay, let me pick and choose like the highest leverage things I can spend my time on to make sure that I am, not like dropping the ball anymore, but at the same time, like, I don't need to like do everything perfectly. That's okay. In the sophomore year, I was like looking for different internships, and a lot of them were software engineering, some of them were banking or consulting, and I wasn't really interested in any one of those fields. But I also knew like I wasn't like someone that would like just like to do research or take it easy. Like I was definitely like professionally driven and motivated, and I was trying to look for like okay, I'm interested in like business and companies and finance and stuff. But I'm also interested in like technology and like so how do I kind of what's a job that takes both those things into account where you can kind of mix and match your interests. And I like happened to stumble upon this role that seemed very cross functional and like, cool in a way because you're like trying to solve business problems through like technology driven solutions, but you're not actually the person coding it, but you're kind of like thinking through what it's going to look like, designing it, specking it out. And, I was like, okay, this seems cool. It's kind of a mix of my interests. It actually is something along the line of what I want to do. Let me check it out. And then I did an internship my sophomore year in a product organization at a company called Okta, and validated that that's actually something I wanted to do. And they were a really strong product team, so working with those people were great, and I got to learn a lot from them. And I'm like, okay, I like when I was interning, I also looked at the rest of the company. I'm like, is there anything else I find more interesting than this? And the answer was no. And so I'm like, okay, if I don't find anything else more interesting, and I want to generally work in this industry, in this space, like this is probably the best role for me. And so I interned at Blend after my junior year. There's a whole, I guess, art about finding internships, so we can get into that later. And then after that, went back to Blend, which was a company I was at before Truework full time on the product team. Blend was great. They really put trust in young people and like gave them a lot of runway to go and like do fun things and be independent and learn and fail and all that. And I was there for a year and a half, and I think Blend grew to a point where I felt like I was ready to try and work on some, go to someplace new, but also go to someplace smaller. I think Blend was becoming a little bit big, and I just wanted to go to like a small place where I could be really independent, run with things, and not be like bogged down by a little bit more like big company politics and things like that. And so I was actually, Blend at 15 product managers when I left, and it grew from 120 to 400 employees. So when I was looking for new role, I'm like, okay, I want to go to a place small that's early that I can grow with. And Truework was hiring their first product manager, and I thought that'd be a fun and cool opportunity to learn a lot. And so that's why I joined. I've been here for 9 months, and so it's been great. Yeah, so I mean, there's definitely pros and cons to both, and there's no right or wrong. So I just want to make that clear. I think it really depends on a couple of things. One, um, do you want to really get mentored and get a lot of guidance and have a lot of structure in your job, especially in the first couple of years out of college? If so, big companies are way, way better than small companies at that. Whether it's big tech companies like Google and Facebook, or big consulting firms like McKinsey and Bain, or banks like Goldman Sachs, or other like accounting like KPMG, whatever it is, like you'll probably provide a lot of structure, get a lot of guidance, and also there'll be like senior people you can learn from, and so that's great. And then the other thing it does help with like the big companies are more like credibility, like you're kind of like have this credibility in your resume and like the stamp of approval saying like you're somewhat competent, and so that's really helpful. I think if you feel like you don't like a lot of like structure you put around you, or like be like managed or like given very small, like let's say domain to run with, I think that's when you probably thrive a lot more in a smaller company. You're basically a lot more independent there. Things are less defined, maybe a little bit more chaotic, but I think you can grow faster, and you can learn more and learn quicker because you're thrown to the deep end. You're not able to get that much support, and so you just got to figure things out for yourself. And I think it really also comes out of personality. Are you someone who's a high risk taker, or maybe someone who's more low risk and more conservative? Because big companies are definitely good for like a more conservative traditional path. There's plenty of great careers you can build there, but if you think you're more of a high risk taker, but let's say like the most high risk thing is maybe start your own company. But if you don't want to do that, like then joining a smaller company would be a good move. But there's also a lot more variance in small companies. Some of them can be really good, some of them can be complete trash. For big companies, there's less variance because their brands are more well known, so you know what you're getting yourself into a little bit better. So I think that those are some of the differences. Um, you can probably make more money in the first couple of years of a big company than a small company too. But the payout, if you find the right company and join it early, could be a lot higher. So again, that's all a risk reward trade off. Yeah, it's a good question. I guess you kind of alluded to like a second thing, which is like what skills you use to make a decision. Like is it analytical and stuff? I think there's definitely all that, like being analytical and data driven stuff. But I think the most underappreciated thing that no one realizes until they get to college, and maybe even after come out of college, is being able to write well and communicate well. And I think there's a huge need for that, especially with a lot of remote work and things like that. And it's very underappreciated skill, especially at a place like TSB when everyone's so focused on like math or science or whatever, and people just forget like communicating is like probably even more important, arguably. And so, sorry, I digress there a little bit. In terms of decisions, you make decisions all the way from like what should we prioritize to work on, and that's more of like you got to understand the industry you're in, the business, the trade-offs you have to make between different priorities, like um, you know and try and like get a sense of that. There are decisions around like how are we going to build something, what approach are we going to take, to collaborate with people to figure that out. How are we going to launch something? How are you going to like communicate to customers about how we're going to go to market with it? And then you work with marketing and sales on that front. How do we price it? How do we package it? How do we promote it? um, so decisions can be really cross-functional. Even things like, I've been doing a lot of interviews, like, should we hire this person? Should we not? What kind of signal or skills are we looking out for this role? So it really varies. But I think like I think the best thing is to like have this analytical rigor. So you should be good with numbers. But at the end of the day, like the best decisions aren't made using numbers or using like, I think the best decisions are made using some sort of intuition or gut sense that should be backed or supplemented by numbers. So trust your gut, and also like learn to communicate well so you can get a lot of inputs into whatever decisions you have to make. Show socializing, get buy-in, things like that. That's an important skill to have. Yeah, so I think, I mean, everyone's gonna answer this differently. I don't. I I in particular like to strive for balance. Like I don't want work to be my life, and I don't want like but I also don't want to like completely compromise on it. And I think that's true of most people in some ways, even though they're afraid to say it. Um, I like am very deliberate about making sure like I like even during COVID like see friends pretty often. I'm able to like go outdoors, do fun things, travel, take vacation, take time off, things like that. I'm all for that. But at the same time, when you work, you do want to work hard and work well. So I think there's just like as long as you can keep things balanced, that'd be great. And that also is good for your mental health because you get a little bit of everything. I don't think I've never had issues with like work and mental health or anything like that. I think but it also depends on like how well can you handle stress and pressure. I'm generally a very easygoing person, and so some stress and pressure in there from work isn't really going to affect my personal life. I know other people where it does a lot more, and so I think it's how well can you do that. If you can't handle that well, maybe some types of jobs aren't right for you. And in terms of like the environment and how it affects it, I think one thing great about the Bay Area and about San Francisco is you surround yourself by like very, very smart, driven, ambitious, capable people. And that means that you're constantly motivated by those around you, even if they're not your company, your friends, your peers, people like that. And so it always encourage you to like make sure you surround yourself with like smart people or driven people. There's this saying you're the average of like your five closest friends. And so make sure you surround yourself with good people. So you ought to be the average of something good. Uh, in terms of like hours and stuff, I mean, generally people in the East Coast, for example, in the U.S., um, like especially who work in New York, like work a lot longer hours than people in the Bay Area, even though the pay is a little lower to begin with. So it really depends on the type of industry you're looking at. If you want to work in a financial company or like consulting firm, like you're gonna put in long hours, maybe work Sundays sometimes, and that's part of the job. And you're gonna pay your dues for 2 3 years. If you don't want to do that, don't work there. Um, but yeah, just I think it's different things are right for different people. You just got to figure out what works for you and do that. Honestly, I don't necessarily agree with the fact that you should try to figure out your professional life while in high school. I think it's too far in the future. I think you should optimize for the best college you can go to, and do something that you generally like. I think that's like plain and simple. I think people think about it too early. They honestly like sometimes bite themselves in the ass because they narrow themselves and sell themselves too early, or because they put undue pressure on themselves, and that's not healthy. So I would just say like generally like try to push yourself to do what you're interested in. Hopefully it there's an overlap between that and something that's like lucrative or a good career path. If not, then maybe have like a be really honest to yourself and say like, is this something I just see myself doing? If not, let me go find something more practical, pragmatic. But like just in high school, optimize for the best college you can get into. That's simple. Once you're the best college, then you're going to be surrounded by smart people, and then you're going to get access to really good opportunities because like top companies will come and recruit on campus, and you'll hear a lot of cool people speak, and you'll get a sense of okay, is this generally a career I want to take, a career I want to do. Also, to people in TSB, I don't think you should take computer science in IB or in high school. Don't do that. Waste of time. If you want to do something, computer science related, just do it on your own. Have fun outside of like an academic setting. I don't think you're going to learn like how to be a programmer sitting in an IB class. And so, yeah, just again, like I would almost think of it in like 2 3 year increments. In high school you want to optimize to get in the best college. Early in college you want to like optimize and get the best college experience. Freshman year, you probably don't think of what you're doing after college or what job you're going to take. Maybe you can have some ideas, but like optimize around like getting into the major, like building a strong group of friends, and things like that. And then slowly like sophomore year, that's when you start thinking about stuff like this. So that would be my 2 cents. Yeah, I've had plenty. Yeah, I mean, just to be completely blunt, it sucks. And I'm kind of grateful. I mean, whoever has a American passport, if you want to be in the U.S., kind of grateful for that. Things may change with election things, but like, who can predict that? In terms of like how that changes your employment, I think you have to be a little bit more. You can't be as risk taking. So maybe you may not be able to join a small company because they may not be able to sponsor international students. Or if you want to start your own company, you may not be able to because you need to like be employed by someone, or you maybe need to be sponsored by someone. And also like there's also a big difference in terms of what major you select. You want to make sure you get a 3 year STEM extension. You don't want to get the non-STEM extension, you only stay for a year. So if you want to optimize for staying in the US or staying in, you want to make sure you do a degree that can allow you to stay here for 3 years without an H1B. So I think there's some things you need to be a lot more practical about because it affects where you can live and your life in a way, in a big way. So you probably have to like figure out companies that can sponsor. They're generally skew bigger. There's some companies that are smaller, but you have to factor all that into your, job hunt and job seeking process. And that's just the reality of it. Once you are able to be more stable, maybe get an H-1B, maybe take a couple of years to get longer sponsorship, then you can actually, go to a company that may not be able to sponsor and work there and like take those risks. And in our parents' generation, that's what they would have done. Um, Obviously it's harder now. Times it takes longer to get visas and things, but yeah, you like make sure you do your homework, are aware of all your options, and like are very realistic about what you should do and optimize for it. Don't try and take big risky bets. I don't think playing around with stuff like visas is, or your like residency in a country is a smart thing to do. So I mean, Berkeley, there's a lot to love and there's a lot to hate about it. Or dislike. Hate's a strong word. Uh, it's not for everyone, but most colleges aren't. It's really big. So the pros of that are you get to meet people from all walks of life, or just all kinds of things, for, and that's really cool to some people. But you can also be constantly really overwhelming. There's very little to no faculty support you'll get. The resources are minimal. You got to go hunt for things and fight for things, and so you got to be very independent and not be like expect like someone will do something for you because no one's gonna do anything for you. You also got to be able to like manage the fact that there's a lot of people and you got to like find your home within Berkeley because whether it's a club or a major or a group of friends, like that's typically where you find your home. It's not like it's not just gonna come to you like it does in other colleges sometimes. So there's a little bit of that. But overall, like what is absolutely incredible about Berkeley is if you're driven, there's like 100 different things with like very smart people working on them, or like the best professors and faculty, or the best programs across many different majors. And you'll never be disappointed if you're driven and want to do something. And there's also that thriving student like clubs and organizations and Greek life, and I was in Greek life too, and like whatever that is. And um, if you I think are proactive and make the most of it, there's tons it has to offer. It's also you know, and I guess other cons are um, yeah, it can feel a little bit impersonal at times, but you just have to at least be a little bit tough. Berkeley forces you to be tough. I think if you're like expected to be coddled or handheld, that's not the place for you. In terms of benefits, like non, I guess, direct benefits of like the college itself, but maybe being in an urban area, being in the Bay Area, I think they're huge. I mean, if I were to go to another college, like it's really hard to say because you haven't gone there. You may line up in the same job in the same role, but I think one, you're exposed to a ton in an urban, in the Bay Area. Two, you're exposed to a ton in an urban environment, whether it's like you can live a lot more, there's a lot more food, a lot more things to do. You're not like in the middle of nowhere, like if you were to go to Cornell or whatever. I'm just using that as an example. um, and then more people come to campus, because you're 30 minutes away from every tech company's headquarters, so it's very easy for them to come and recruit. It's also a target school for a lot of big, like even East Coast companies, and so that's great. So it does make a difference, but at the end of the day, like if you really want to do something, where you go to college doesn't matter. You will get it done. But I do think like there are these like you know subtle ways it can affect what you do later without you realizing. Oh, you met a friend who convinced you to do something, or like inspired you, or you know you got inspired by a professor, or whatever it is. So definitely like I think the urban rural thing is really big. I'm a big advocate for being in a slightly more urban area. I don't think you want to be in the middle of New York City, so maybe like you need a campus and some sort of home like that. But at the same point, being coming from India with a very bustling environment and going straight into a rural American environment, life is very different. It's very slow outside college, so just something to keep in mind.